Robert Redford, a defining figure of the silent generation in Hollywood, had an enormously influential career as both an actor and director. He was renowned for embodying the complex spirit of the American antihero and flawed protagonist in iconic films such as Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and All the President's Men. Beyond acting, Redford was a highly esteemed director, having won the Academy Award for Best Director for his film Ordinary People. Critically, he founded the Sundance Institute and the Sundance Film Festival, which has become the premier platform for promoting independent cinema worldwide. His distinctive presence often elevated the material, which is evident in one of his most iconic films, The Natural. The story of aging baseball star Roy Hobbs is so closely tied with Redford's unique blend of ruggedness and vulnerability that the film would likely not have worked with any other actor in the lead role. The film The Natural is a mythical and inspiring story about the life and redemption of baseball prodigy Roy Hobbs, portrayed by Robert Redford. The film is structured as a fable, beginning with a prologue. As a young, supremely talented ball player in the 1920s, Roy crafts his legendary bat Wonder Boy from a tree split by lightning. On his way to a tryout with the Chicago Cubs, he strikes out a famous major league player known as the Whammer. This feat draws the attention of Harriet Bird, a mysterious and mentally unstable woman with a fixation on murdering champion athletes. She lures him to her hotel room and shoots him with a silver bullet, derailing his career. 16 years later, in 1939, a 35-year-old Hobbs emerged from obscurity to join the last place New York Knights as a rookie. Initially skeptical, manager Pop Fisher is soon astounded by Roy's incredible hitting power. Roy becomes an overnight sensation, leading the Knights on an unprecedented winning streak and pulling them up in the National League standings. Roy's success draws the attention of corrupt forces. The team's shadowy co owner, the judge, who stands to gain full control of the team if they fail to win the pennant, tries to manipulate Roy. He also becomes romantically involved with Pop's niece, Memo Paris, who is associated with a powerful gambler, Gus Sands. The relationship causes Roy to fall into a prolonged hitting slump. While in his slump, Roy is reunited with his childhood sweetheart, Iris Gaines, played by Glenn Close. She appears in the stands and inspires him to hit a game winning home run that shatters the ballpark clock. Iris later reveals to Roy that she has a teenage son, his son. Shortly after, Roy collapses due to his old bullet wound, which the judge and Memo try to exploit by bribing him to throw the final pennant deciding playoff game. Roy refuses the bribe. In the bottom of the ninth inning of the final game, with the Knights trailing, Roy steps up to the plate, his wound bleeding through his uniform. After his legendary bat Wonder Boy splinters on a foul ball, he uses a replacement bat provided by a young bat boy. With a final swing, he hits a heroic home run that sends fireworks bursting, shatters the stadium lights, and wins the pennant, fulfilling his lifelong dream and achieving his redemption. The film ends with Roy playing catch with his son on his childhood farm, with Iris watching. Robert Redford was one of Hollywood's most relatable leading men, known for characters who felt authentic and human. He was no John Wayne. Even when portraying a hero, his roles were never simple white hat figures. Instead, he specialized in playing complex protagonists and anti-heroes, men with palpable flaws whose ultimate success we still cheered for. This ability is perfectly captured in The Natural. One scene that really shows his capabilities was a quiet moment in a Chicago cafe where Iris asked Roy, "What happened to you?" The regret visible on his face in that scene demonstrates Redford's mastery in conveying the emotional weight of a man burdened by his own past. A kind of nuanced performance he delivered better than almost anyone. In cinema, we often crave heroes who are morally flawless, the Captain Americas and the Supermen of the world. Yet in real life, such perfection is unattainable. We are all more like the complex, struggling Iron Man. We are defined by our weaknesses, and our personal kryptonite isn't a tangible element, but is often an internal struggle like doubt, fear, or stubborn pride. Ultimately, these imperfections are what make us relatable and grant us the depth required for genuine human connection and true heroism. While the imperfect hero is often considered a hallmark of modern cinema, the portrayal of flawed protagonists has deep roots in Hollywood's golden age. Many of the era's most acclaimed films feature leading men and women whose complexities challenge the simple definition of a white hat hero. Canonical films such as Citizen Kane, Casablanca, Gone with the Wind, and even Rear Window all rely on such figures. For instance, Charles Foster Kane is driven by ego and isolation, while Rick Blaine is a cynical idealist reluctantly drawn back into action, proving that audiences have long been captivated by heroes and heroines who are anything but squeaky clean. While Robert Redford's filmography is rich with portrayals of flawed figures, from the charismatic outlaw in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid to the cynical journalist in All the President's Men, no role better captures the arc of a flawed hero finding redemption than Roy Hobbs in The Natural. The film is a masterful study of second chances, where Hobbs, an aging baseball star haunted by past choices and missed opportunities, attempts to rebuild his life. His journey encapsulates the very definition of a relatable hero, a figure riddled with human error whose eventual triumph feels earned precisely because of the distance he had to travel from personal failure. According to writer Christopher Booker's analysis in the Seven Basic Plots, one of the fundamental narrative structures is the rebirth plot. This structure details a flawed hero trapped by a dark power or personal failing who is eventually released through transformative experiences. A classic example is Homer's The Odyssey, where the hero must overcome a series of trials to return home and reclaim his rightful identity. The narrative of The Natural closely aligns with this structure, as Roy Hobbs is presented as a hero whose great talent is initially imprisoned by his past trauma and poor choices, setting the stage for his eventual, hard won self redemption. The moment Roy Hobbs is asked by Harriet Bird if he has read Homer marks his symbolic entry into his own personal odyssey. Throughout the narrative of The Natural, the characters and the events strongly echo the epic poem. Harriet Bird serves as a treacherous siren, whose initial encounter effectively strands Roy, stripping him of his ambition and future. The steadfast Iris represents Penelope, patiently waiting for the return of her man and the restoration of her life. Meanwhile, the corrupting Memo Paris functions as Calypso, holding the hero captive and delaying his journey home, aided by her co conspirators, the judge, Gus Sands, and Max Mercy. The film's climax, Roy's dramatic game winning home run, powerfully mirrors Odysseus restringing his bow, a definitive act that proves his identity and earns him his rightful place back with Penelope. The final peaceful scene of Roy, Iris, and their son playing baseball reestablishes the family unit and confirms the hero's ultimate return home. One could speculate that this domestic bliss, occurring in 1939, suggests a future where their teenage son might soon be swept into World War II. implying that the cycle of the Odyssey could begin anew for the next generation. The film subtly reveals the timeline of Roy Hobbs' exile during his conversation with Iris in Chicago. We learn that his near fatal shooting occurred 16 years prior in 1923, followed by 2 years of recovery, placing his release from the hospital around 1925. This 16-year gap is historically awkward. If he was fit to be released by 1925, at the height of the Roaring Twenties, his prolonged absence until the 1939 season cannot be blamed on the Great Depression. This inconsistency was likely a case of dramatic license, deliberately stretching the timeline to align with Robert Redford's age, in the late 40s at the time of filming, and his mature portrayal of a character in his late 30s. Had the gap been shorter, say 12 years, which would have made the narrative more historically consistent, the film would have lost the thematic power of Roy Hobbs as a man consumed by years of regret and wasted potential, delaying his much needed redemption. The detail of a silver bullet lodging in Roy Hobbs' body for 16 years presents a biological inaccuracy. Unlike the poisonous lead typically used in ammunition, silver is non reactive and non caustic. A retained silver bullet would likely cause no long term harm. However, the filmmaker's choice of silver ignores science in favor of mythological resonance. The silver bullet is not meant to be a chemical agent, but a potent symbol, a weapon of fate or supernatural malice. It is used to nearly kill and then incapacitate the hero. In a film steeped in epic archetypes and themes of good versus evil, the material of the bullet functions not as a physical threat, but as a mythical wound that halts Roy Hobbs' destiny until his rebirth can begin. The spectacular home run that concludes a natural is frequently criticized as physically impossible, a judgment I disagree with. One physicist calculated the distance that the ball would have traveled unobstructed at approximately 550 feet, which, while immense, would make it only the third longest in Major League Baseball history, placing it believably behind legendary shots by Babe Ruth and Mickey Mantle. Furthermore, the explosion of the electric fireworks that follows it is not necessarily impossible. The film repeatedly establishes that the stadium's upkeep has been severely neglected by the judge. This neglect plausibly extends to the aging electrical system and deteriorating wiring, suggesting that a home run of that tremendous force could indeed cause a dramatic, albeit highly improbable, cascade failure of the overhead lights, fitting the film's blend of realism and heightened mythological spectacle. The film takes significant liberty with the actual baseball history of 1939, particularly in the setting of the National League pennant playoff against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Historically, the Pirates were non contenders that year, finishing 15 games below 500 and a distant 28.5 games behind the actual league winner, the Cincinnati Reds, who ultimately lost the World Series to the New York Yankees. The choice to use the Pirates rather than the true historical contender highlights the movie's primary function: to create a heightened dramatic stage for Roy Hobbs' story. The film is fundamentally committed to myth making over strict historical realism, freely altering the MLB context to best serve its internal narrative of good versus evil and redemption. The film establishes the dire straits of the New York Knights by immediately confirming that they are in last place at the time Roy Hobbs joins the roster. While the exact numerical distance between the Knights and the top of the standings is never specified in the newspapers shown on screen, this ambiguity is a deliberate narrative choice. By obscuring how far behind the team is, the filmmakers maximize dramatic stakes, turning the Knights into the ultimate underdogs. Their subsequent rapid ascent from the bottom of the league effectively underscores the miraculous, transformative power that Hobbs, the returned hero, brings to the team. Crucially, a newspaper flash in the mid-season montage reveals that the Knights' situation was less dire than initially portrayed. On July 8th, after Iris's visit helped restart their winning streak, the team is shown to be in third place and only 8 games back of the league leaders. Since the season is roughly halfway complete at this point, being only 8 games out of first place suggests that the team was far from a historic disaster, likely hovering near 500. This glaring discrepancy strongly implies that Max Mercy was actively assisting the judge by deliberately painting the team as worse than they were in the press to discourage ticket sales and ensure Pops failed. This also implies that either the entire league was hovering around 500, or more likely, that the Knights were not stuck in last place for long. It's plausible that the team had a respectable April and May, with Roy's predecessor, both on the field and with Memo, Bump Bailey, playing well. This generated hope in the early season, long before Roy Hobbs arrived, a critical detail, since Roy had to arrive while the pennant was still a mathematical possibility for the team. Therefore, the disastrous losing streak, which was already underway when the audience first meets the Knights, must have coincided with Bump Bailey's slump and his dramatic affair with Memo. This slide likely began shortly before Memorial Day, mere weeks prior to Hobbs' arrival. The incredible narrative of the New York Knights' comeback, however improbable, is paralleled by occasional feats in real life baseball. For instance, in the 2025 season, the Cleveland Guardians engineered the largest division winning comeback in Major League Baseball history, successfully erasing a 15.5 game deficit that they faced against the Detroit Tigers on July 6th. While this dramatic rally was arguably aided by a poor late season slump by the Tigers, the sheer scale of the turnaround provides a plausible, real world context for the Knights' miraculous ascent from last place. Though the Guardians ultimately lost to the Tigers in the wild card round, the success of their improbable regular season rally validates the possibility of such dramatic reversals of fortune in professional baseball. The 1969 Miracle Mets offer one of baseball's most stunning real-life examples of an improbable comeback, echoing the fictional rise of the New York Knights. The team's backstory was one of perpetual failure. They had finished in last place in every season since their 1962 debut. The 1969 season began with a little promise, and by the end of May, the team was in third place and 9 games behind the division leading Chicago Cubs. Their gradual ascent accelerated into a historic surge fueled by an extraordinary 23-win September. This late season dominance, coupled with a dramatic collapse by the Cubs, allowed the Mets to vault into first place, finishing an incredible 8 games ahead of their rival. The sheer magnitude of this turnaround, from perennial cellar dweller to a 100-win division championship, culminated in defeating the heavily favored Baltimore Orioles to win the World Series, firmly cementing the Mets story as the gold standard for an impossible sporting redemption. While the New York Knights' move from last place in mid-June to first place by late September is technically possible, the film's narrative glosses over the colossal domino effect required for such a rapid shift. For the Knights to catch up solely by winning, the rest of the National League would have to simultaneously collapse, a key element that is conspicuously missing from the story. Since the Knights play only one team at a time, the other teams in the league are constantly playing and winning against each other. This reality means that the Knights' fictional momentum requires an unrealistic, systemic failure across the entire league. Ultimately, the film sacrifices the gritty realism of a baseball pennant race for the sake of its mythological structure, accelerating the timeline to perfectly pace Roy Hobbs' dramatic individual journey toward redemption. The Natural stands as a great example of the rebirth narrative, demonstrating that the film's true victory lies not in Roy Hobbs' return to baseball, but his return to Iris and their son. This final reunion is the emotional and thematic fulfillment that so strongly echoes Homer's The Odyssey. Further elevating the modern myth is Randy Newman's masterful score, which brilliantly channels the sweeping, lyrical Americana style of composers like Aaron Copland, lending the film an epic score. All of these elements, the mythological structure, the masterful score, and Robert Redford's poignant performance combine to make The Natural arguably the finest American adaptation of Homer's epic tale and one of Robert Redford's most memorable roles. Thanks for watching. Next time, we're diving into the cult science fiction classic Logan's Run, a truly fascinating and perhaps chilling look at a society completely controlled by artificial intelligence. You won't want to miss our breakdown of that bleak future vision. After tackling that serious sci fi epic, we'll shift gears entirely for a dose of classic comedy as we discuss the uproarious Leslie Nielsen classic, The Naked Gun, by special request. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss either of these videos, and let me know in the comments below which film you're most looking forward to. I do take suggestions. If you enjoyed this discussion, please subscribe now. I'm pushing hard to reach 1,000 subscribers, and when we hit that milestone, I'll let you, the viewers, vote on the next film we discuss on the channel. Also, please share this video with a friend and help grow our community and let them join the discussion. See you then.